Trade season seems to be ramping up around the NBA, but is the Miami Heat a buyer or a seller? We debate that and some potential targets on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramill. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Jam-packed show for you today. We're going to talk about some players that the Heat could target before the trade deadline, some players on the Heat's roster that the Heat could trade away if they become sellers between now and February. But we spent a lot of time talking about Jimmy Butler's future as there's more and more reporting around that situation this week. But I want to shift gears, talk about something else, talk about what else the Heat could do before the trade deadline, because it's not all about Jimmy Butler. I think the first question, though, the first thing that we need to ask is whether or not the Heat should be buyers or sellers. And David, if the Heat beat the Thunder tonight, I think they need to do a reevaluation of what this team could do, what this team's ceiling is, because there would have been 5-6 over their last six, or 5-1 over their last 6 games.
Right.
That's almost a quarter of their season so far, playing really good basketball. There's an argument that they could be looking to add a piece or two. At this point where they're climbing up the Eastern Conference standings. So just because there's this idea out there that they might be listening to trade offers for Jimmy Butler, I think there's more. I think there's more to what the Miami Heat can do. We've already seen them make one move, right, by trading away Thomas Bryant. There's just other things that they have to worry about. And again, if they beat the Thunder tonight, 5-1 over the last 6 games, you can make an argument that they should be looking to add to this roster.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And I argued this on Locked On NBA. We started off the show, and my thought process going into the episode was looking around the league, and I thought, you know what, there's so many teams that are kind of right on the cusp, because this issue, and I keep coming back to this, the league-wide parity makes things so interesting, because you have a number of teams that probably feel like they're close enough or right into the mix, especially in the Eastern Conference, where you have this kind of glut right in the middle. You have 2 teams at the top, and then kind of everybody else more or less in between the 3 through 8 spots. And they're all close enough where they could say, you know what, maybe we're a seller, maybe we're a buyer, and we want to add to our roster, Miami being one among them too. When you look at this Heat roster, I think flatly you could say, well, they're probably not good enough to be a title contender, because they're just not elite at any one aspect. They don't necessarily get the superstar level production from more than one player on any given night. And that being the case, they should probably be sellers, but the Heat front office doesn't view it that way. They're buyers. I think they're moving forward with the idea that they're going to add to this roster, regardless of the outcome of the Oklahoma City game. Like, even if they wind up having to trade Jimmy Butler just because of the eventual contract demands, my thought is that they'll probably still look to add a player, as we've talked about before, that could contribute to winning in the short term, and another player that can contribute to winning in the long term. I just don't know that that deal is available for them. And that being the case, they might just wind up standing pat and winding up with Jimmy Butler on the roster at the end of the season. And as we've said before, probably letting him walk in the offseason for nothing, and that's a fine approach. I mean, if that's what you think is likely to happen, I think, if they think that they can still win, maybe go on another deep run for whatever that's worth, it means enough to this front office not to just trade Jimmy Butler away for some potential that might not ever be realized. And so it's a really strange place for this front office to be in. That's how I view the situation playing out anyway.
I don't mean to put so much emphasis on the OKC game. I was just more making a point that this team is playing really well lately, and they're playing Orlando Thursday night, and we're recording this before that game, and then the second night of a back-to-back Friday in Miami. So it's a tough schedule for them regardless, coming off of that NBA Cup run that they made. So the Heat will have the rest advantage, in other words, and so this should be a wounded Thunder team walking into Kaseya Center. Still a very good one. And the Heat have been playing great basketball. They have been a top 10 team over these last couple of weeks. And it's just, I understand it's more than just they're not just trading Jimmy Butler to trade Jimmy Butler. If they do trade Jimmy Butler, there's a contract situation and everything that goes along with it. It's very complicated. We've talked enough about it. There is an argument to be made that though they could just add to this group, and if you are adding to this group and it's and not aggressively shopping Jimmy Butler and saying, and by the way, and like if I agree with you, very real possibility that Miami just says we're playing good, let's just keep Jimmy Butler, let's let him walk in free agency, and we just saw this with the Clippers and Paul George. They preferred the cap space, and it's less walking away for nothing, and it's more trading away a player for cap space, right? Like you could argue if you're the Clippers, hey, we didn't really like any of the trade offers out there for Paul George. We preferred the cap space that we were able to acquire Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, Nick Batum. And like you could just say, like the Clippers, they could argue, we traded Paul George for Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, Nick Batum, all this, the cap flexibility. And you can make a strong argument they made the right choice, right? They're a 500 team. They're kind of plucky in that play-in mix in the Western Conference. So if you're the Heat, you could look at it the same way.
That's without Kawhi Leonard too.
Right. And so if you're the Heat, you could look at it that way and say, we're just going to roll with this. We'll figure out the Jimmy Butler situation in the summer. Him walking away for nothing isn't the worst case scenario anymore based on how this new salary cap works. And in the meantime, maybe we add to this group. Now, whatever they do add can't be a long-term player. It can't be a Terry Rozier situation again, where you're dealing with this contract, where you're acquiring at that time a 3-year contract. I think it would have to be somebody, a contract that's probably expiring or eminently tradable this summer if you decided to pivot. And that to me is where things get a little complicated, that it's not going to be a pick of the litter, right? It's not going to be, hey, just start moving more first round picks. I don't think that they're going to start selling off future assets because the future with Jimmy Butler is so murky right now that would be too risky to do. But maybe there's something out there where it's maybe more of a minor move. In other words, I don't see the superstar being out there, right? If there's a superstar trade out there, Jimmy Butler's the superstar name that's out there right now. Right, exactly. So, but beyond that, maybe it's just like a little helpful piece here or there. And I think they'll at least be looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some superstar names, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, you can make a case for against it, but I don't even know that New Orleans necessarily wants to move on from Williamson. Like, I know we've heard some reporting that almost everybody on the roster is available. I don't know. I don't think Miami's interested in Williamson nor in Ingram.
Should they be interested in Ingram? I know he's injured
again,
right now, but he's coming back.
As we talked about in the previous episode regarding Bradley Beal, like Ingram is a fine enough player to add to the current roster if you can move him for some of the pieces that just aren't playing well, like Rozier and maybe some of the kids or the younger rookie contracts, I should say. Not all of them are kids, but other than that, I don't know that he's a piece to build around. I don't think that he's part of a big three moving forward alongside Tyler and Bam. And I think, again, that's how they're viewed. Like, you could make the argument. I know a lot of our listeners have made the argument that there's nobody on this roster to build around. But I just don't think that that's how the Heat views it. I think the Heat sees this group as a big three of Jimmy, Tyler, and Bam. And Pat Riley has said as much in past press conferences. And that being the case, I don't know that they're going to add Ingram in place of Jimmy and be like, okay, well, we're pretty content with the way that we've shaped this roster.
The interesting thing about Brandon Ingram is his contract is expiring.
Yes, it's another deal.
And so if you're the Heat and Jimmy Butler walks away, you can also say, well, we're just not going to re-sign Brandon Ingram either. And so you're not taking on any long-term salary. But if you think that Brandon Ingram can help in the short term this season, then you could say, hey, this is kind of a win-win for us. And then if he is great for us, we can re-sign him on maybe a team-friendly deal.
But isn't that the Kuminga argument all over again? Isn't that the Kuminga argument all over again? Like, we debated this a couple episodes ago. Like, why would Miami have any interest in Jonathan Kuminga, or are they scared off by the potential contract?
I think Ingram's a better player than Kuminga is right now. I think that would be just the difference, is he can help us right now. As with Kuminga, you're kind of projecting forward in terms of like, what is this guy? We don't even know. We know what Brandon Ingram is. He's a scorer. And that's basically all he is. I think he's a better playmaker than people give him credit for. He's flashed episodes of facilitating and things like that. But, I could talk myself into him helping this team for a couple of months and then just sort of kicking the can down the road. And if he walks away, the thing is, you would not trade Jimmy Butler for him. You would not trade Tyler Hero for him. Tyler Hero is a better player than Brandon Ingram is right now. And obviously wouldn't trade Bam for him. So what would you be trading for him? I can't imagine New Orleans being like, yeah, let's add another overpaid guard to our roster. So that's not going to happen. You start stacking salaries. Maybe you can get there with like a Duncan Robinson here and something else over there. I don't know. That part becomes more difficult, but like that would be a really interesting swing. That type of thing where this guy's on an expiring contract, maybe a little bit overpaid right now. Future's a little bit murky, but maybe we can almost use that to our advantage. Something like that would be interesting. But we got a few more trade deadline targets. If the Heat are buyers, there's an obvious target in Chicago who I think could transform the way the Heat play. I'll tell you who it is, why he could be easily gettable after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. They've got over 10 million members, and they've given away billions of dollars in winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less on the projections of 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's so easy to use, very, very simple. And right now, around the holidays, you can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You're going to be watching them anyway. Now you can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks, and they now offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits right into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picks Month. That's simple. Again, it's very easy to use. You just download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Just download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, Prize Picks, run your game all season. We'll be right back. Oh, wait. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're looking to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, well, Rocket RX has a solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team and complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you can get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started. It only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions do apply. Rocket RX, better sex made simple. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free today at LockedOnDaily.com. If the Heat decide to explore the trade market and add to this team, David, what kind of player should they be looking for? I've got a specific name that I want to get to, but I think it for just sort of conceptualize what this team needs.
I mean, I think it's shoring up the starting lineup, especially at the forward spot. That's been a target for a while now, so it feels like this is kind of a conversation we've had over the last few seasons. But they haven't really had much success or consistency during the Jimmy Butler era, and I think it's cost them, especially during their run to the finals a couple seasons ago. So if I'm looking at somebody, I would say a stretch 4, somebody who can guard at a decent enough level, and somebody who can stretch the floor from the outside to allow Bam to continue to explore the mid-range and be effective around the basket, which is what we've seen from him of late.
That would be great. Like a guy who's like 6'10", 6'11", could shoot the 3, help with a little bit rebounding. Basically everything that they thought Nikola Jovic was going to be. And that player is not on the roster. I agree with you. I think finding another... How real is this Drew Smith thing? I love the guy. It's been so fun, like watching him kind of rise up the ranks and on the depth chart and everything. But like adding one more piece, kind of like that, could be interesting. This team might need another wing, a backup center. Like it feels like this team could use a lot of things. I think this team can use a little bit of a transformation, like a curve, like some kind of curveball. It feels like the Heat are just like your Nolan Ryan, just fastball after fastball. It's all I have in the arsenal. I didn't watch Nolan Ryan. I don't know if that's a fair assessment of Nolan Ryan's game, but it just feels like they have the one pitch, right? And sometimes it works. but it's like, hey, Jimmy Butler or Tyler Hero have a big game. Usually we win. Our defense gets like 10 plus steals, and we kind of win that way. They don't have another way of winning, in other words. And they don't really have different kinds of lineups. Eric Spoelstra likes to call this team versatile, and I've argued for years now this team isn't versatile. It's limited. It's the opposite of versatile. They play small, and they can only kind of play that one way. Adding somebody who could play with some size, and maybe instead of a stretch 4 to stretch 5, who can push Bam to that 4 spot,
fair enough,
would at least give them a different look. I don't know if that look would work. I don't know if it would be the best look. Probably at the end of games, they would still go to Bam at the 5. And that's fine, because that's worked for them over the years, and that's fine. But just at least being able to kind of throw a different pitch, I think would be interesting. And so the guy that I was thinking about in Chicago, not Zach LaVine, not Patrick Williams, not Lonzo Ball, your old friend, David, Nikola Vucevic, to me, would be a really interesting buy low guy. Jake Fisher reported the other day that he could probably be gotten for a few second-round picks. And the Heat just acquired a second-round pick swap from Indiana in 2031. That's at least a second-round pick that they might be able to move. They have a 2026 second-round pick coming from the Lakers, which might end up being a pretty good second-round pick.
Yes.
Could you trade that, maybe acquire another second-round pick in another way, send 3 or 4 of those to Chicago, get Vucevic? It would take sending a chunky salary back. Vucevic is making about $20 million a year. He's not expiring, but he's only got one more year left on his contract next year. And if he's giving you that other look, I think he's somebody that you could say, okay, if it's a post-Jimmy Butler world, then Vucevic plus Bam Adebayo for a year in that front court next year isn't the worst thing for us. Like, that still is a functional thing. It makes us a little bit different. It gives us a new identity post-Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
Vucevic on-court value hasn't been this high since probably his last year in Orlando. He's playing great.
Yep.
I don't know. If the Bulls are selling on this guy, I think somebody's going to get him, and they're going to be really happy with him. Yeah. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be Miami.
Well, I've made that argument before too, so I'm all for it. I like Vooch. He's a great locker room guy. A little quiet, obviously, as most European players tend to be, but I mean, very steady, solid leadership. Always a good presence. Steadying, doesn't get too high, too low, which, could be to some detriment because, you might question his commitment to winning because he's not necessarily as emotive as you might want it to be. But we know what the rebounding is like. Miami fans should be very familiar with, although that's taken a decline given his age and everything else like that. But the floor spacing, the vision, the passing, like he brings a playmaking aspect to the center position that, right now is what Bam gives you. And I think if you have both him and Bam out on the floor, it would be great. You could have different lineups where you can take Bam out. You can put Bam at the 5. You could do a lot of things differently. And of course, as you pointed out, shooting almost 40% from 3-point range.
I'm looking it up right now. 47.5% from 3-point range on almost 4.5 attempts per game. That's going to come down. Hopefully it wouldn't just come all the way down once he gets traded. Yeah. And then you end up with egg on your face. But he's been a good 3-point shooter for most of his career. Yeah, no, he can stretch the floor. He's always had the mid-range game, and then he's just continually taking a step back. And teams guard him from the 3-point line. And that's even more important than him actually making the shots in some regard. Like, okay, if he's out there, that's creating space for Jimmy and Bam on the inside. Absolutely. I mean, you've got to play and drop. That makes the paint a little bit easier to attack. You can, you can do a lot of things there. And look, given Miami's commitment to zone defense, I don't think Vooch is ever going to be considered a strong defender. I don't know if he's necessarily a poor one either, but he can be functional in the zone defense, which is what Miami's going to run anyway. So it doesn't necessarily, there are no bad reasons to do it aside from the salary. I don't know what you would do to have to acquire Vooch. Well, to your point with the defense, I'm with you. He's in a tough defensive spot right now in Chicago where he's being asked to anchor that defense. Because there's not a whole lot of good defenders that he's playing, and there haven't been there for a few years. In Miami, he's playing with Bam, with Jimmy, presumably, with Haywood Highsmith, with Drew Smith, being coached by Eric Spoelstra, right? Like, Billy Donovan's a fine coach, not known as a defensive savant. Eric Spoelstra might be the best defensive coach in the NBA. So, yeah, I'm here for it. You could play him in drop, you could play him in zone. He can get up to the level of the screen and show a little bit. He could do some stuff, and if he's bracketed by these other high-level defenders, it becomes less of an issue, and then what you're getting in terms of the rewards on the offensive end, I would really be looking into this if I were Miami. This is a gettable guy, and it just feels like every year there's a center who gets moved, who's overlooked for one reason or the other, and then he ends up on a new spot in a better location and with a better fit, and everybody's like, why didn't we see this? Daniel Gafford last year, Kristaps Porzingis over the summer. Just these guys get moved and all like overlooked guys, and you're just like, wow, maybe we should have done that.
Yeah.
And I think Vooch is going to be that next guy.
Vooch, Jonas Valanciunas, that's another name that's been linked out there. But it's just I think Vooch is a much better floor spacer. And look, I mean, consider who you're facing. And that's probably been what Miami has been a little myopic with in terms of how they approach trades. It's like we want to establish our tempo, we want to establish our game, but you've got to consider who you're playing against. You're going up against eventually, and assuming you make the playoffs, you're going up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're going up against the Boston Celtics.
Such a great point.
You want to take Porzingis out of the paint. You want to take Jared Allen out of the paint. A guy like Vooch does that. And helps them so much because it then allows seams in the defense where you can exploit those to get easier buckets, which has been Miami's Achilles heel whenever they make the playoffs. If they defend at a high level, they get just enough, and then offensively they fall flat. Let's say
Vucevic
somehow
to guard Brook Lopez, where Bam can guard Giannis, right? And it takes it would make Bam better. I would be doing it. I would be on the phone with Chicago, right? Really, a few second-round picks, figure out how to get them. And
you have to move Duncan in order to do so. And is it worth moving Duncan in order to do so?
That's the part of the conversation I didn't want to have because that part's hard.
That part stings. Like it'd be great to think you can move Terry Rozier in a second-round pick.
I know.
Sure.
I know.
Chicago's not doing that.
Let's oh no, look at this. We got to go to break. We're going to talk about if the Miami Heat are sellers, who should be on the selling block. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Wow. Skirting the issue.
Skirted that away. Went right away from that. Just took that exit right off the highway.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. Sometimes you're getting a hunch in the middle of a game. You're watching something and I want to check out the other action around the league. Well, you can do that. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play. You can do all that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets, but only when you visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. David, if the Miami Heat are sellers, and we already saw they've sold on Thomas Bryant. I think the Heat are willing to trade away players who maybe have disappointed, don't have a role, don't have as big of a role as they anticipated.
Yep. That
leads us to Terry Rozier, doesn't it? I don't know what the market is for Rozier. I don't know who is wanting a $20+ million a year scoring guard who is not doing a great job scoring the ball right now. He's got another year left on his contract. It is mostly guaranteed. Again, I see this all the time online. Oh, Terry Rozier's next year is non-guaranteed. They can trade it. They can get out of it. It's guaranteed for all but like $1.5 million. All right, it's still $25+ million. It's a lot of money to pay Terry Rozier. So no front office is looking at that as a non-guaranteed deal. They're basically looking at it as a fully guaranteed, almost fully guaranteed contract. So it's not a tradable deal. It's really not. And I don't know, when you look across the league, for the record, I think the Lakers are having the same problem looking at places for D'Angelo Russell, and at least his deal is expiring. He comes off the books this summer, and I think even they're having a hard time saying, like, hey, like, who wants a D'Lo? Who wants a D'Lo?
Right.
There's just not that many teams when you kind of look at the landscape of the NBA that need kind of an inefficient scoring guard who doesn't provide much else.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the teams with salary cap space. I don't see there any reason why they take on a guy like Terry Rozier, not till next season. Like, that's a conversation to have a year from now. And unfortunately, he just hasn't lived up to the expectations that he came here with, and he just hasn't thrived. Would you consider waiving him outright? I mean, I guess you still couldn't acquire a player like Vooch then. I mean,
it's pointless.
It's just not a lot of options. They took a swing and it just hasn't worked out. Like, I mean, we heard from Andy Ellisberg over the offseason. Their big move over the offseason was committed in February when they acquired Terry Rozier. They thought he was going to be the guy that they were missing and to replace what they weren't getting from Kyle Lowry.
Turns out their big move was re-signing Drew Smith.
Yeah, not exactly the offseason that a lot of players expect, or a lot of fans expected.
Okay, so we've already decided no team is just taking him on. You can't attach a first-round pick to Rozier to get off of him. I understand there's a sunk cost fallacy and that you can't get into that, but you already traded 1 first-round pick for him. So basically, we're going to be trading 2 first-round picks for a few months of Terry Rozier and then to get rid of him. Like that's an absolute catastrophe for Miami's front office. Would you be willing to attach a young player to Rozier?
Yes.
And maybe get something back?
Yes. I could see.
Yeah. And the player coming back would also probably not be on. Maybe that player is on an expiring. I don't know. And then the rival team or the other team is just trying to get something for that player. I don't really know what. I don't have a player in mind. In other words, but if you're the Heat, maybe you're calling around and shopping. Hey, we've got Rozier plus one of these young players. Are you interested?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why anybody should be off limits. Maybe of all the young players that are currently in the roster, probably Ware is the least likely because after trading Thomas Bryant, you're going to need something there. But
Still
in
think
theory,
this team is high on Jaime. I think it would take them quite a bit to come off of Jaime, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe. But again, I mean, if you can add a player of Vucevic and you want to maximize the Jimmy window for as long as it might be here, maybe you can consider next season. That's a bridge to cross at a later point. And if all it costs you, I know you don't want to have to move on from Jaime, but it feels like he's somewhat capped out. There might be some more potential for him to explore and continue to get better, and maybe he just needs a starting role. Maybe that's something that opens up this summer if Jimmy walks out in free agency, and then you're kind of still looking at a team with, let's say you acquire Vucevic somehow. You can keep Vuce and you keep Jaquez. I mean, I think Jovic, as much as we like him and as much as we think that there's really some great potential there, he's just not going to be able to break out. And whether that's whether that's the problem with the coaching staff or whether that's something for Nico to kind of explore.
He's out of the rotation.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, he's out of the rotation.
Would you do then, moving off of Vucevic, one name that I kind of also have on my short list of players that the Heat should target, Bruce Brown in Toronto, expiring contract. They've already turned down second-round picks for him. I don't know what they're realistically going to get for Bruce Brown. It sounds like they're holding out for a first, but we've also seen Toronto trade their guys for other young players as opposed to draft picks, right? They moved OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. They got young players back for those guys, not picks. Could you do Rozier and a Jovic or something like that, a young player, to Toronto for Bruce Brown? It almost feels like an overpay, but if you're the Heat, you get a useful player, guy on an expiring, you can re-sign him to a more team-friendly deal this summer. You acquire his bird rights, I believe.
Yeah.
Because it's been 3 years since he signed that contract. I don't know. That something like that.
Is he going to be healthy at some point this season? I mean, I know he's been
That's
out.
a great question. Based on all the reporting, it sounds like he's expected to come back and that Toronto might not be rushing him back onto the court right now.
Yeah, they're not playing for anything. I mean, I assume that if Miami would acquire him, they'd want him right away. They're a former Hurricane too, so there's a local tie. He would be the guy maybe off the bench who could provide the spark that Rozier has not been able to do consistently enough.
Where's cowboy hats? So that's good.
Go to the Davie Rodeo Fairgrounds there. I mean.
Good. Yeah. He'll get a place in Southwest Ranches. He'll fit right in.
Absolutely. Right next to UT. I think it'd be great. Look, I don't know. I think there's some potential there. Moving off of Nico in order to acquire Bruce Brown is a kind of lateral move because I think you're giving up on some of the potential there. But I think Brown's a better player than Rozier is. But you're giving up on whatever Nico might be able to become. But he might not become that here in Miami. And so I think you'd have to explore it if Miami could make that deal. Yeah, absolutely they should.
In terms of other players, not to just do the Terry Rozier thing, but Alec Burks, Thomas Bryant, maybe there's a second-round pick out there. There's a team that just wants a little bit of a scoring jolt off the bench. He's been out of the rotation. Drew Smith's elevation obviously is a part of that.
Yeah,
I can't imagine them. I've heard some stuff about, hey, maybe they should sell high on Duncan Robinson right now. His contract is really tradable. It's $19 million this year, $20 million next year, but only about half of that is guaranteed.
Yeah.
So it's a really tradable contract. He's playing great. Like and the Heat starting lineup has worked with Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. Their 2-man combination has been great. Like, I don't know that I would, and that's sort of why I kind of like veered off the highway when you brought it up in the last segment. I was like, he's been really helpful to this Heat team right now. But is there a player out there that would be an upgraded version of that? Maybe. I don't know. But I think it would take more to get off of Duncan Robinson now than basically the way that he was viewed in the past.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And then I think the young guys, like, are they willing to sell on Jovic, Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez? And if they are, what are they trying to get back for those guys? Is it more of a win now piece? Is it another bite at the apple? Is it like another, hey, let's trade this lottery ticket in for a new lottery ticket type of thing? I don't know. It could be something like that too, but
it's typically not how they operate, right?
It's not, right? I was just gonna say.
Yeah. If they're moving somebody they invested a first round pick in, it's either to package them for another player. Like, I mean, look, Karan Butler, right? He was moved for Shaquille O'Neal. That's Shaquille O'Neal, completely different argument. But you'd want to exchange a player that you drafted, that you believed in, and that you see has some promise, but you're looking to get a player that is going to contribute today.
They get an all-star level,
I don't think they would move those young players unless they're going to get somebody who's going to help win now. For however high that ceiling might be, they still view it as high enough to continue to lean into this year.
The last name I'll throw to you, and you could just tell me no. Haywood Highsmith. If at $5 million a year, really team-friendly contract, top flight defender, I think there's going to be a lot of, like, the Brooklyn Nets are going to get a lot of calls on Dorian Finney-Smith. They can only trade him to one team. There's going to be a team that loses out on Dorian Finney-Smith. And that team could call up Miami and be like, can we get your Dorian Finney-Smith? The Dorian Finney-Smith light and Haywood Highsmith. The Heat would not, I don't think that the Heat are shopping Haywood Highsmith. This is completely speculative. But what would it take? Like, everybody's got a price. Like, a good first round pick, that one that projects in the top 20. Like, what would it take, in other words, for Miami to say, yeah, maybe we do this?
What about Cam Johnson? Would that be a more interesting player, considering he's shooting as well as he is from the perimeter? I mean, is he your answer at the 4?
I think the Heat should be calling for Cam Johnson. I think he's the same thing as DFS, though. There's a lot of teams calling probably for Cam Johnson. He's making like $20+ million a year, though.
Is he making that much? I thought it was closer to 10. I really didn't know the exact details regarding the contract. If he's making that much money, then again, that kind of takes Miami out of it. So I don't know. I don't know. Again, is Dorian Finney-Smith that much of a significant upgrade over Haywood?
No. I'm saying Dorian Finney-Smith gets traded somewhere else. Let's say the Lakers get
another contending team.
Yeah.
And then there's
going to be so many teams trying to get Dorian Finney-Smith that one of these teams are not going to get Dorian Finney-Smith. That team could call Miami and say, well, then what can we get for Highsmith? Or what would it take to get Highsmith? Because he's similar to Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Like a long-rangey wing, upgrades your defense right away, kind of just plug and play. So if there's another team out there, I do wonder, like, what would it take for the Heat to say, we'll take a step back, we'll take this guy who's been an important starter for us, we'll take him out of the lineup, we'll trade him away because we're getting this is such a valuable asset coming back. I don't know. I don't think they would do it for like the new in vogue, like, here's 5 second-round picks package. I don't think the Heat would do it for that. Yeah. But if a team came calling with a first-round pick, which I don't know that they would, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But like, if you're the Heat, you at least have to have a meeting about it.
Yeah, I think they would certainly discuss it and entertain it. I just don't think that they would pull the trigger on it. And also, if there was that much league-wide interest in Haywood, we didn't really see that manifest during free agency. And obviously, the new CBA kind of limits what you can do in terms of that. But I just don't think a lot of people saw. I think a lot of people see Haywood Highsmith and they're thinking Gabe Vincent. It's like, what's going to happen when he joins our team? Is he going to? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. He's going to shoot 20% from the field and not play at a high defensive level. He's only 6'5". So, there's a lot of concerns, I think, around the rest of the league about what kind of player you're getting, Caleb Martin, et cetera. I mean, I don't know. I don't think Highsmith is going to attract that much attention there.
You're right. If you're traveling over this weekend for the holidays, safe travels. That'll do it for us for the week. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.